Magnitude 5.2? That is the number that got attached to a mountain on the Nepal-Tibet border. For nearly 2 days, most reports treated this like a normal earthquake. It was not a normal earthquake at all. When investigators went back through the seismic readings, they found no tectonic rupture underground. What actually happened was something far stranger than a shifting fault line. A section of mountain came down with enough force to register as a 5.2 on its own. And that is nowhere near the strangest part of this story. Over 460 people are confirmed dead, and more than 1,400 are still missing. Downstream, a river that should have stayed calm rose 9 meters in about 30 minutes. There was no monsoon rain that day, no storm sitting anywhere near the source, just clear skies, a sudden collapse high in the mountains, and a wall of water racing downhill. Here's the detail that investigators still cannot fully explain. Satellite images from before this event show no lake sitting in that valley. None at all, which leaves exactly one real question standing. Where did all of that water actually come from? By the end of this video, you will understand what really collapsed up there in Nepal's Rasua district. You will also understand why the earthquake explanation fell apart so quickly. And you will understand why the missing lake might be the strangest part of this entire event. Because this is not simply a landslide story, and it is not simply a flood story. This is the story of a mountain slope that failed in a way researchers are still trying to reconstruct. Let's start with what actually happened on that mountain in the first place. Roughly 20 kilometers from the Nepal-China border, high in Himalayan terrain, a massive section of glacier gave way. Local university researchers describe it as a huge block of ice breaking free from a much larger glacier body. Satellite analysis shows the collapse left a gash nearly 3,000 feet wide across the mountainside. That block then dropped more than 1,200 meters, almost straight down into the valley floor. Picture that motion for a second, because it matters for what comes next. That is not a slow landslide creeping down a gentle hillside. That is a mass of ice and rock in near free fall for most of a kilometer. When it hit the valley floor, it hit with enough energy to shatter solid rock on impact. That impact is exactly why footage from the area looks like something from a disaster film. Once that mass slammed into the valley, it did not behave like a typical rock slide. It fractured apart, tore up loose ground beneath it, and entered the river system directly. And this is exactly where a simple collapse story stops being simple. A glacier collapse alone rarely explains a flood wave moving near 200 kilometers per hour. So now let's talk about why the original explanation for this event kept changing. 2 days in, the working theory was straightforward. A moderate earthquake had triggered the collapse. That explanation made sense on paper, since earthquakes destabilize mountain slopes all the time. But once seismic data was reanalyzed against fresh satellite imagery, that explanation completely fell apart. The signal was never coming from underground movement along a fault. It was coming from the impact of the collapse hitting the valley floor. So the entire sequence flips. It was not earthquake first and collapse second. It was collapse first, and that collapse generated a seismic reading strong enough to look like an earthquake. That single reversal changes the whole question researchers are now chasing. It is no longer about what triggered an earthquake. It is about what made a glacier and a mountain slope fail together on a clear, sunny day. Nobody downstream saw this coming because there was genuinely nothing normal to watch for. No storm building overhead, no warning system built for a threat shaped like this one. The danger started miles away, high in terrain most people in the valley could not even see. By the time the river showed any visible sign of trouble, the flood wave was already close. Now, here's the number that actually matters more than the original magnitude reading. The flood wave covered its first 22 kilometers in under 7 minutes, near 200 kilometers per hour. For comparison, most flash floods move at a fraction of that speed, giving people at least some time to react. This one gave almost nobody in its direct path any real time to react at all. And that wall did not come out of nowhere, because this river has done something like this before. About a year earlier, a similar glacial lake event in this same region killed 9 people. It is possible that memory is part of why the death toll here is not even higher. People in these valleys have heard this river make this specific sound before. Some residents reportedly ran the moment they heard the rumble without waiting to see the water arrive. But last year's flood and this one are not really the same kind of event. Last year followed a pattern researchers understand well. A glacial lake fills slowly over weeks. Pressure builds gradually until the lake eventually bursts in one sudden release. That earlier event had a lake you could literally point to on a map the whole time. This time, there is no lake to point to at all. The evidence instead points to a massive physical collapse of ice and rock starting far above the valley. That difference is exactly what changed how researchers are reading this entire event. So let's walk through the leading theory that is currently being investigated. Scientists now believe a massive glacier chunk broke away and triggered a landslide beneath it at nearly the same moment. It likely blocked the river outright for a short period of time. Water kept arriving from upstream with nowhere left to go, so it began pooling behind the debris. From there, one of two things typically happens next in a situation like this. The water eventually tops the blockage slowly, or the blockage fails all at once. Investigators currently believe it was the second option, a fast, sudden failure. Satellite data reportedly showed a temporary blockage roughly 20 kilometers upstream of the populated areas. That detail is consistent with a debris dam having existed there, even if only briefly. Here's where the story gets genuinely strange, and I want you to actually stay with this part. When researchers examined newer satellite imagery, they could clearly see the aftermath of the avalanche. What they could not clearly see was a large lake or an obvious standing blockage behind it. That is exactly the thing you would expect to find if enough water had built up to do this. So the mystery from earlier has not gone anywhere. It has actually gotten more complicated. If a lake big enough to cause this existed, it may have lasted only minutes, not days. That means researchers might be trying to reconstruct something that barely left a visible trace behind. Before we go further, if this story is genuinely new information for you, take a second to subscribe. It helps us keep tracking developing events like this one as new data comes in. Now, let's talk about why the destruction downstream looks the way it does. Survivors describing the surge say it was not clean floodwater moving through the valley. It was carrying rock, sediment, mud, chunks of ice, and uprooted trees all moving together. That mixture completely changes the physics of what actually hits a village. Plain water tends to flow around structures and eventually recede without leveling everything in its path. A surge loaded with solid material behaves more like wet concrete pushed forward at speed. That description lines up with reports of vehicles disappearing beneath debris entirely. It also lines up with lower floors of buildings being buried completely in several locations. The narrow valley geography made all of this significantly worse than it might have been elsewhere. In steep Himalayan terrain, floodwater has almost nowhere to spread out sideways. Energy that would normally scatter across an open floodplain instead stays fully concentrated. That concentrated force gets funneled directly toward whatever is built right where the valley narrows. If you have ever experienced fast-moving water catching you off guard, drop your story in the comments. It is a genuine reminder of how differently people experience the exact same kind of event. Now here's the part where scientists still owe us a real answer. Why did a glacier and a mountain slope fail together on a day with no storm anywhere nearby? The leading theory under investigation right now points toward heat, not rainfall. Sustained high temperatures in the region can significantly increase glacial melt over time. That meltwater does not simply run off the surface and disappear. Some of it works its way deep into fractures called crevasses inside the glacier itself. Glaciers are not solid ice all the way through, they are riddled with deep internal cracks. Meltwater can travel through those cracks and pool in hidden pockets far beneath the visible surface. Think of it less like a lake sitting in an open bowl on top of the ice. Think of it more like water trapped inside a sponge, invisible until the sponge itself breaks apart. If a large section of that fractured glacier suddenly failed, everything stored inside would release at once. Water, ice, and rock all coming down together in a single violent moment. The theory would finally explain a major flood with no visible lake sitting behind it. The water was never sitting above the ice in plain view, it was hidden deep inside it. But researchers are careful to say this may still only be part of the full explanation. It would be premature to claim any single cause explains this exact event on this exact day. What can be said with far more confidence is the broader pattern across the entire region. The Himalayas are warming faster than the global average, and that trend is well documented. Glaciers across this range are thinning and retreating at a pace that concerns researchers. Scientists have been increasingly worried about exactly this kind of cascading hazard for several years now. Ice, rock, and water failing together, sometimes without any obvious warning sign at all. Let's separate what is actually confirmed here from what genuinely remains an open question. This story has shifted more than once already, and honesty matters more than false certainty. Confirmed, this was not an earthquake that triggered a glacier collapse afterward. Reanalyzed seismic data shows the sequence ran in the opposite direction entirely. Confirmed, there was no rainfall event capable of explaining a flood on this scale. It happened under a completely clear sky with no storm system anywhere nearby. Confirmed, satellite imagery shows no large surface lake in that valley before or after the collapse. Confirmed, tragically, the death toll stands above 460, with more than 1,400 still missing. Still unknown the exact identity of the specific glacier section that failed. Be cautious of anyone online naming one with complete confidence, because researchers have not confirmed that yet either. Still unknown precisely where all of that water was actually stored before release. The leading theory involves hidden meltwater trapped deep inside glacial fractures. Still unknown whether any remaining blocked water upstream is still holding or has already released. That single detail determines whether this event is genuinely finished or not. So here is exactly what we will be watching for going forward from here. First, official confirmation of the source glacier and whether any upstream blockage is still intact. Second, results from a fuller satellite pass over the crevasse system in that same region. That data could reveal whether nearby glaciers are holding similarly hidden pockets of water right now. Third, and this is the bigger question, how many other slopes across this range look the same? If warming ice destabilizing rock from the inside is truly the mechanism here, this may not be isolated. If warming ice destabilizing rock from the inside is truly the mechanism here, this may not be isolated. Other valleys nearby could be capable of producing an event like this with almost no warning. This channel is going to keep tracking every update on this story as new information comes in. If a new glacier is officially identified or new satellite data changes the picture, you will hear it here. That is exactly what A-Zone YT is built around: being early, being accurate, and being honest. We are not here to manufacture panic or exaggerate a tragedy for views. Every claim in this video came directly from official sources, researchers, and verified reporting. When something is confirmed, we tell you clearly that it is confirmed. When something is still uncertain, we tell you that just as clearly. If you want the next update the moment new data comes in, subscribe to A-Zone YT right now. Turn on notifications so you do not miss it when the story develops further. Drop a comment with what part of this story surprised you the most. We read through these and it helps us understand what to dig into next. Stay informed, stay grounded in what is actually confirmed, and we will see you in the next update.